Welcome everyone. Welcome to Megha's Micro. Today I have Ashok. He's one of the coolest CEOs I know. So I'm so happy to have him. When we think of a CEO, a very big figure comes to our mind, like suited and stiff. But you are very different from that. So to know fun part of you. You like to invent things. I know that you have an engineering background, semiconductors, and now fraud prevention and tech-oriented work. So let's imagine that you are like a master inventor, right? So what's the most outlandish gadget which you would like to invent or have, and how will it like change the life as we have it today?
Yeah, I thought about this, and I actually wouldn't think of it as a gadget. I in my past life I wanted to be a physicist when I was in high school. So there's one concept in physics which blows my mind. It is basically about quantum entanglement. Around two particles quantumly entangled, any distance, they kind of spin change. If one changes its spin, the other one changes it, regardless of where it is in the universe. So I would have kind of tried to build something out of that, because basically imagine today if you're going to Mars, if you're having a conversation, the conversation would be with somebody on Mars. It would take about 2 minutes to transfer audio, because that's a distance. But if you were to use quantum entanglement, you could potentially do that instantaneously. So you could actually be like normal conversation, regardless of where in the world. So that's something which I'd be quite excited about doing. Having said that, the reason I have this kind of tattoo is also these are two particles which are quantumly entangled. So kind of, I'm kind of fascinated by that concept.
So Ashok, if you could get an opportunity to swap life with a historical figure, who would that be?
Okay, again, contextually, like I'm gonna give us some bit of context. I'm a bit. There are two things which I loved in high school. One was history, and the other one was physics, and uh, and and history, specifically Indian history. Right, I am fascinated by it, especially in the independence struggle. So I would actually kind of swap lives with maybe three people, not just one. It would be Subhash Chandra Bose, Bhagat Singh, or Gandhi. And the reason for that is also that all three of them had a very different style of fighting for independence. One, obviously, Gandhi was a completely peaceful protest. On the other extreme, you had Subhash Chandra Bose and Bhagat Singh. But they are also very different, because Bhagat Singh fought it as a guerrilla warfare, but Subhash Chandra Bose had an army that he created. So it's like, how do you live that life? How do you dedicate your life to the country? It's something that just fascinates me, how people think about that, and how they sacrifice so much
Yeah.
for the others.
And if you have to pick just one between the three, just curious, which is
Gandhi.
Gandhi. Okay.
Gandhi took such a alternate position to anything in the before him. So that's something which is fascinating, because position was that, hey, we're going to do this completely non-violent.
In fact, I'm also a big fan of Gandhi. And any fun thing which people don't know about you?
Couple of things. One is I'm a scuba diver, and I've been a scuba diver since 1993. I learned it in Curacao. So every year I try to do about 6 to 7 dives somewhere in the world. Fascination with water. The first day I started swimming up to
Deep waters.
about 150 feet.
Wow. Wow. I can go only in a guided scuba diving tour where somebody holds my hands and takes me around and then brings me back.
Scuba diving is actually not that difficult. Even people who don't know how to swim can. But what the problem is, I think it's a fear that, what happens if the water gets into my nose, or whatever? What happens if I drown? That's what the usually people are afraid of. It's not actually that difficult.
Yeah, we went to Cairns a few years back, and then I did that snorkeling, but I can't recall whether I did scuba diving also or not. But yes, we did a lot of fun water activities. Talking to you, I have the strong temptation of obviously talking about fraud. A big thing is you've been able to establish yourself that with your name, fraud comes to people's mind, which is a big thing. Now,
Oh gosh, I shouldn't be known as a fraudster.
similar also. Imagine you are a fraudster, or if you are an ethical hacker. However, don't spill too much beans that people start attacking that system. So, why do you believe you think like a fraudster?
Being in the space for 13 years, it kind of makes you think like a fraudster. Fraud, which is bothering me these days, is what I call synthetic identity. Synthetic identity is where I think it's probably the most elaborate type of fraud around, where an identity is built over a period of time and where you actually have good credit scores and because you're paying your loans off and you're waiting for 4 5 years before you do the big fraud and run away. It's going to increase over the next few years, and that's what bothers me the most. Relatively hard to detect synthetic identity. It's an identity that is built over many years after taking over somebody else's identity sometimes, especially somebody who's probably in the know as well. Like it might be a villager somewhere. It might be so kind of is harder to detect because the fraudster has a lot of patience. And so he's also playing the game for a longer period of time.
Do you fear with this new age technology becoming so easily available, so cheaply available to anyone and everyone? How is it going to impact this fraud as a business kind of work?
So there are two parts of me. One, as a citizen of the country, yes. As a company running a fraud detection platform, I think this is the best problem to solve, right? So the best part for us, at least as IDfy, is that fraud evolves, and if fraud evolves, there are new ways of catching it. So and that excites the heck out of me. That how do you keep catching new types of fraud, right? And that's we build tools for that. I think, Mega, you have been doing that for many years as well, and at TU. Isn't it from your own perspective? Isn't that the most exciting part? That this happens in Europe?
Yeah.
But as a citizen of the country, it is concerning, especially when the fraud happens to elderly people or emotionally, distraught people, because fraudsters also take a moment in time when people are emotionally, not as strong to kind of attack. So I've heard it's very interesting one because uh, uh, one of the frauds I've recently been hearing about is when a parent dies, for example, and you've gone and filed your death certificate, etc. At that moment, the fraudster attacks because people. I mean, I think these data is also leaking all over the place. He attacks at that moment, saying, "Hey, your father left me some money, and I want to give it back to you. And here, beta, I will send it to you." And you get an SMS saying that you have transferred the money. And then he calls again and says, "Hey, I transferred a little more than what I should have. Can you transfer it back to me?" But actually, that SMS is from some random number. But when you're emotionally distraught, your likelihood of falling for it is a lot higher. And so that's, I think, the fear I have is that they are playing on emotions, not just on technology. They play a lot on the state of mind of the individual itself.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just technology, but on emotions also. And the two things which people used to say that greed and fear. But I also now increasingly see overconfidence that so when I post anything or I tell people about things which are happening on fraud, people just don't pay so much attention. But then every now and then, every group, every circle I am in, every now and then people are falling victim. And once they
Correct.
get into it, then they realize that, oh, this has happened. So many incidents keep happening. There is digital arrest kind of thing which is happening, that has happened with 2 or 3 of my friends already. And then within 3 hours, and there is that Skype call with a police station and whatnot, and all type of things which you must have also heard that you can't disconnect the call, it's recorded, and so they try to emotionally bind you and then take advantage.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I must tell you this interesting story because I constantly think like a fraudster. Uh, well, at our office once, I mean, the guy, I think some government agency showed up. They wanted to see the books, and I thought they were fraudsters because I was like, how do I know you're not a fraudster? And he's showing me his ID. I said, yeah, ID to me, I'll go down and print it in a printer. So and that guy didn't know how to respond to it because he was like, wait a second, how do I prove my identity? I'm like, sorry, I'm in the business of catching fraudsters. I'm not going to fall for this.
Right. Yeah. But it happens with me also. That day I got a call that they are calling from Ministry of Home Affairs, and I know a few people there. So, but how do I know it's actually a genuine person, or they're just calling and trying to then fool me afterwards? Similarly, somebody else reached out that I'm a lawyer and I'm just going to appear for an interview on cyber defense, and I want to seek inputs. And I said that okay, so then I asked, and then he said, this person has given me a reference. Then I took the snapshot, I validated it with that person. Did you indeed give that reference? Is it actually a genuine person? Am I supposed to talk? So I end up questioning everything, which I
Right.
don't see any harm with, but maybe that's how we are got so accustomed by questioning everything. Not easy to start a company, right? From semiconductor engineering to finding India's fastest growing company in this space of fraud and ID. This journey is very different and, to be honest, fairly remarkable. Is this something you had thought about? How did you come here from semiconductors to fraud prevention?
I don't think there's any dots which connect, to be honest. so, so I mean, I was very happy in my engineering world. I was building the multi-service edge routers and processors for those. So that's what my background LSI design. And then went on to do my MBA, post MBA, British Telecom in London, hated my job a little bit. So came back to India to start my first company, right? Which was called Gaboli at that time, and at that time, what we envisioned was like something like a Coursera, but we were way ahead of our time. We thought education needs to be disrupted. This is before Coursera existed, and academy existed, and education needs to be disrupted through technology. And but we were too early, right? And in that process of running that company, I had posted a job on Naukri, and 1,000 in those days you'd get a lot of applications. Nowadays, if you post a job, you don't get that many applications anymore. But in those days, you used to get 1,600 applications, right? But the interesting thing was there are three people who applied with the same resume, word for word, except for the name change, right? And these three people like had grammatical mistakes in their resume, like to the tune of like, oh, I will be working at this company for this many years, very colloquial Indian way of talking. And I was like, wait a second, if you're going to copy from a guy who's at least well established. So anyway, long story short, we called them over, interviewed them because just curiosity, right? How do these people think? And that kind of triggered something in my head, saying, or in mine and Pete's head at that time, just were like, dude, like Indians lie a lot. There must be a way to catch this. And if you catch it, like I mean, a billion people, you do the math, you start to think, there are so many transactions. Can we catch it in all these places? Sort of where it started, and we thought about it for about 6-7 months. And then the genesis of IDfy, right? And IDfy was relatively small for the longest period of time. It's been 13 years, but we largely grew only in the last 4 to 5 years. Most of our time we were just waiting for industry to pick up, right? Because this industry didn't take, like, the KYC industry was still physical. Everything was being done physically. Digital onboarding didn't happen in India. We just waited for the moment when the regulator picks up and when industry picks up. And after COVID, things have been amazing because obviously everybody went digital during COVID. Uh, Great run for the last 4 years, but yeah, I would say there is absolutely no connection between my semiconductor life and my it really comes from a moment. Uh, and actually, my wife said this about last year, and she told me, like, I never thought this company was going to succeed. I'm like, 13 years I've run this company. You've been my wife for this. Why would you be now?
It is safe to tell now. So,
And my wife was like, "Nee, you're some semiconductor guy. Now you're doing fraud. You don't even know the industry. you don't you don't know ABCD of what fraud means. What? How are you going to do this?" And I said, "Okay." And then I struggled for 8 years. So I struggled for 8 years. At that moment, you could have told me He's like, "No, you were having a lot of fun in at work and you're in a great team and everything. I didn't want to be a party pooper. So, I let it be." I'm like, my God, man, my own wife didn't have any confidence in my business.
but it is so funny. So those three fraudulent resumes ignited the thought of creating a fraud prevention company.
There were actually two moments. There were two moments. One was those fraudulent resumes. The other one was when I came back to India from London. I looked for an apartment in Bandra, and that story, by the way, is on our website as well. Is when I was looking for this house, there's this old lady who was Catholic lady who had this house which was empty for like a year. One of my friends knew her, so he said, "Hey, you should talk to her." But then she never rents it out because she's always scared of renting this out. She was about 70, 72 or something at that time. And so I went and talked to her. She talked to me for a couple of hours. I talked to her about entrepreneurship. I talked to her about my ISB degree. I went to the US for my engineering. None of it mattered. In the end, after about 1 hour, she said, "What is your caste?" I'm like, "You're a Catholic lady. How does it matter to you?" So I said, I said this. I don't want to tell you, but I'll tell you I'm a South Indian. I'm Tamilian. And she goes, "Oh, you're a Tamilian. Okay, I'll give you the house." I said, "Why will you give me a house? Because I'm Tamilian." Like, she goes, uh, "South Indian log jagda nahi karte." Like, so that was the other trigger, right? Because we lack information in our decisioning. We make very suboptimal decisions with data that we have. Oh, Banya will be a businessman. Gujarati is a businessman. So some, Punjabi is probably, if you're from Punjab, you're probably an army man. All these weird parallels. Or army guys are all genuine people. That because that's another fraud that's happening in the country.
Fraud. They were trying
Yeah, right.
victimize us also on that army one.
That was another trigger saying that lack of data makes decisioning very weak.
But back then, I also realized because I've also been in the banking for the first decade of my career. It was very qualitative in that manner. Calcutta, high risk, and this Hyderabad. Now, these pockets are Secunderabad is high risk, and these some other are low risk. Right. So underwriting was in many ways self-employed, high risk, salaried, low risk, salaried, 8-year, low risk. Additional verification, yes or no, irrespective. But those it was compartmentalized in that manner, and a lot of pride was taken, in that segment of people who were creating those policies. That over the years we have garnered this experience, and these are the policies. Don't question it with data or quantitative, but this is how it is.
Yeah. And to some extent, I think the advent of TransUnion, Experian, all of this and credit bureaus in general has made it more democratized, right? Like now data can tell you uh, uh, how to make decisioning rather than some person and his ideas.
Right, absolutely. Now, talking about risk taking, right? Starting a company from scratch. You came back from London, so it must be like a good job, and you're leaving that behind, and then you're coming in here and starting company from scratch, irrespective of the domain. And in a new domain, even more trickier. But starting it from scratch. Were there strategies you had in mind to minimize risk? Did you plan it that what are my risk mitigants, or you just wanted to take a risk for X number of years? How did you thought about starting it from scratch? A lot of people fear in starting.
I mean, fortunately, I met my wife in ISP. She was an investment banker. She was my risk mitigant.
Right? We all need that risk mitigant in life.
Lifestyle wise, she was earning quite well. enough for like probably the two of us and some babies also. So it wasn't that much of a problem because of that, number one. And so I could last 8-9 years without the company doing that well for a long period of time. But honestly, it was just that I wanted to start something. I wanted to like be. I didn't want to wear a suit. I didn't want to wear a shirt. I wanted to wear a t-shirt and shorts. So, so I was like, hey, like this is not going to happen if I don't start it myself. So that's sort of, yeah. And then you had a great. I, we built a great team. A lot of them from my original 12 that were there in the first part of first 12 people at IDfy. Out of that, we still have 4 or 5 of them in the org today. So like it just interesting to build teams, I think, and that's where the inspiration came from. I don't think it was necessarily about making money. That wasn't the only goal. Probably not even the most important part of the goal either. When we started, like somebody asked me, "What is your number?" And I thrown a random number, saying $5 million ban ke mera ho gaya. But now when I look back, I'm sitting there going, in the last 13 years, what I've realized is running this business is my mission in life. It's not that money really. So, I'm not intending to sell IDfy and stuff like that. It's largely to see if this org can be built over a longer period of time, and can we make it professionally run.
Oh, nice. Thank you. I like the risk mitigant part the most.
So when you start a company, you should have either a sugar mama or a sugar daddy, one of those two.
$47 million has been raised so far, and 27 million was in the last round.
Yes.
That's quite a feat for a startup. Like for last few years only, when you have actively started, thinking about raising funding and taking it to a bigger scale. So, what is about the fundraising process, and do you want to give some 2-3 tips for people who are looking to raise funds? Is it about value prop, or is it about what is it that resonates most with the potential investors?
Honestly, I don't have an answer to that, because every VC that I've met, every single PE firm that I've met, and every investor that I've had, including TransUnion, which is an investor in us, which was announced 2 years ago. Everybody behaves so differently, and there are different criteria for each of them. Right? So it's very hard to put it into a box saying all VCs will behave like this, all PEs will behave like this. But I stuck to my gun a bit. I think whenever I've raised is come out as genuine as you can. There's no point in building stories which are not true. Even if that increases the valuation, at some point it's going to come and bite you. Like be as honest, open, high integrity, and hopefully at some point people will realize that there's value in that. Um, and I've always banked on integrity as my core component. I might come across as brash, but I won't ever come across as low integrity. That is my goal in life. I might have very strong opinions, but I should not be coming across, as well as internally as well. Don't do anything like which is not right, ethically right. I don't think that's a formula for raising. I would say that is a formula for building long-lasting organizations. Don't do stupid things, right? And as long as you build a good org, build show that you're high integrity. It's okay if the valuation is not perfect. It's fine. Like people will recognize you at some point.
Right, right. And I think I saw most of these things. We can see it in your eyes, the high integrity and standing by your own self and your own guns. We can see all of that.
Yeah. You see what you get, right?
Yeah, and it's safe, right? So that that whatever is there is right there. And global expansion. So not talking about numbers, but otherwise, like global expansion comes with its own set of challenges, and I have personally, seen those challenges. Can you outline some steps which, any leaders who are looking for global expansion should keep in mind?
I think we went about it slightly differently than others, and I'll tell you what we did. Like usually what people do is they go after US, Europe as the first strategy, right? We didn't do that. We went after Philippines, Indonesia, MENA as our three regions as the first step of growth. Now, why did we do that? We wanted to minimize the amount of risk in attacking a market. But like a US, if you want to attack a US, you need a big war chest. You have to burn a lot of capital. But Southeast Asia was very interesting because you don't have to burn capital to build. But these countries are like kind of 3-4 years behind in terms of digitization strategy in general, like India has done, right? So you could potentially be a number one and number two player in these countries.
In international expansion, you minimized risk and then you strategically picked up areas which are closer, better time zone, and which and the places which we already know are slightly behind us in terms of tech and innovation.
Start operations in these countries because one, it's culturally similar. Number one. Number two, it's kind of like India in terms of India like 5 years ago in terms of the transformation that they're going through. You can become the number one or number two player in these countries, and it's low cost, so you can actually you don't have to spend a lot of money to expand in these. That has kind of played out well for us because these countries now are profitable for us within a year.
Perfect. Thank you. So, on your personal passions, you did touch about scuba diving. I saw on your website about you liking history, mythology, basketball, collecting whiskey, and all these diverse set of personal passions. How is it adding to you as an entrepreneur or a leader?
I think sports has played a very important part in my life in my childhood because something like a basketball team sports etc. Because that I think gave me those things about how do you inspire a team, how do you work as a team. I think sports is just in general a great way to build leadership, right? Scuba diving is just passion. It's just water. It's something which is inspiring. So it's almost meditative. So by the way, I also do vipassana. So I do the
Wow.
10-day Vipassana retreat every year. It's part of the process of cleansing your own mind and being with yourself and things like that. So which I think is important to take breaks and uh, and, and especially breaks for your own mental sort of well-being. I don't think we take mental well-being as a very important thing as entrepreneurs. Overextend ourselves a lot. Most of the entrepreneurs I know suffer from anxiety, right? And it's a tough business. It's a tough thing to run a company. We don't acknowledge that.
How often you go for Vipassana? Like you go one.
I do the 10-day retreat, but I practice every day.
Okay, so there are meditation techniques which you practice every day out of it.
So every year I do the 10-day retreat, which is 15 hours of meditation that you have to go through a day.
Yeah, it's one of the toughest, right? Like I've done some retreats. I follow this Brahma Kumari school of thought. So there are retreat centers here, and I go there, and there are meditative practices. But what I've heard is that
This one is
Vipassana is the toughest, right? You are like locked in that small room with no device and no connection to the outside world at all, right?
correct. Correct. No conversation, no books, no paper, no pen. You can't write your thoughts down. You have to. It's you yourself in your mind.
Wow, for 10 days at a stretch, and you can't talk to anybody. You don't see anyone, or you get to see people.
You see people like at lunch when you're having lunch and stuff, but you don't even do eye contact. You're not supposed to. So it's very extreme. Keeps me sane.
Okay, so now just to wrap up, if there is one thing people want to remember you for, Ashok, Hariharan, IDfy, or leave aside IDfy, Ashok as a person, if there's one thing which you want to leave a legacy of, or people should remember you for, what would that be?
Marry well.
heard this much later in my life that it was the biggest career decision.
I think without the support of my wife, without marrying her, who does quite well in her own career, a lot of what I do would have not happened. So, jokes aside, obviously that's a very important one because I think without my wife, this wouldn't have happened. One of the things IDfy has always done is over-index on culture. There should be enough companies which over-index on culture, right? And there aren't that. Most of them are overly aggressive with people internally. They don't build leadership inside. I feel really sad about it that there are not that many companies which invest in people as much as they should.
So culture, people, integrity, and value system is what you stand for.
Yeah.
In addition to marrying well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ashok. I really appreciate your time, and you taking out time is a really big thing.